Picture this. You're lying in bed at 3 a.m., your mind racing with worries about tomorrow's presentation, next month's bills, or that awkward conversation you had earlier. Your heart pounds as you scroll through social media, only to be bombarded with more reasons to feel anxious about the state of the world. Sound familiar? You're not alone. In our hyper-connected, always-on modern society, anxiety has become an epidemic affecting millions of people worldwide. But what if I told you that the solution to managing this overwhelming anxiety isn't found in the latest self-help trend or expensive therapy app, but in the wisdom of philosophers who lived over 2,000 years ago? Welcome to the transformative world of Stoicism, an ancient Greek and Roman philosophy that has quietly become one of the most powerful tools for mental resilience in our chaotic modern world. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming a emotionless robot, as many people mistakenly believe. Instead, it's a practical philosophy that teaches us how to distinguish between what we can and cannot control, how to respond rather than react to life's challenges, and how to find inner peace regardless of external circumstances. Think of it as ancient cognitive behavioral therapy, because that's essentially what it is. The great Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire while battling plagues and wars, Epictetus, who overcame slavery and physical disability, and Seneca, who navigated the treacherous politics of ancient Rome, all developed and refined these principles not in ivory towers, but in the midst of real-world struggles that would challenge anyone's mental fortitude. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote in his personal journal, now known as Meditations, about his own struggles with anxiety, self-doubt, and the overwhelming responsibilities of leadership. His Stoic practices helped him maintain clarity and composure while managing an empire spanning 3 continents during one of history's most challenging periods. What makes Stoicism particularly relevant for our modern anxiety epidemic is its intensely practical nature. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts meant for academic debate. They're mental tools designed to be used daily in real situations by real people facing real problems. Whether you're dealing with job insecurity, relationship troubles, health concerns, or simply the general overwhelm of modern life, Stoic principles offer concrete strategies for maintaining your mental equilibrium. In today's exploration, we're going to dive deep into how these ancient wisdom traditions can be applied to our contemporary struggles with anxiety. We'll discover practical techniques that you can start using immediately, from the Stoic practice of negative visualization that helps you build resilience, to the discipline of perception that transforms how you interpret stressful situations, to the evening reflection ritual that brings clarity and peace to your daily life. You'll learn why acceptance isn't resignation, how to stop wasting mental energy on things beyond your influence, and most importantly, how to develop what the Stoics called ataraxia, a state of serene calmness that remains unshaken by external turbulence. This isn't about becoming indifferent to life's challenges, but about developing the inner strength and wisdom to navigate them with grace and effectiveness. So whether you're completely new to Stoicism or have dabbled in its teachings before, prepare to discover how this time-tested philosophy can become your personal toolkit for conquering anxiety and building unshakable mental resilience in our uncertain world. Now that we understand why Stoicism has endured for over 2 millennia as a practical philosophy for life's challenges, let's dive into its most fundamental and transformative principle, the one that can immediately begin to reduce your anxiety levels. This is what Stoics call the dichotomy of control, and it's arguably the most powerful mental framework you can develop for managing worry and stress. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential philosophers, opened his teachings with these life-changing words: "Some things are within our power, while others are not." Simple, right? Yet this seemingly basic distinction forms the foundation of all Stoic practice and holds the key to liberating yourself from the endless cycle of anxiety that plagues modern life. Here's the revolutionary insight that can transform your relationship with anxiety. Most of our mental suffering doesn't come from external events themselves, but from our futile attempts to control things that are fundamentally beyond our influence. Think about your last major anxiety spiral. Were you worried about something that was entirely within your control? Or were you, like most of us, spinning your wheels trying to control outcomes, other people's opinions, future events, or circumstances beyond your direct influence? The Stoics identified that there are really only three things we can truly control: our judgments, our decisions, and our actions. That's it. Everything else, other people's behavior, economic conditions, natural disasters, the past, the future, even our own reputation, falls into the category of things we cannot control. This might sound limiting at first, but it's actually incredibly liberating. Let's take a practical example that resonates with modern anxiety. Imagine you're worried about a job interview next week. Traditional anxiety tells you to obsess over every possible question, imagine worst-case scenarios, and try to predict and control the interviewer's reactions. But the Stoic approach asks, what can you actually control in this situation? You can control how well you prepare, researching the company, practicing your responses, getting adequate sleep the night before. You can control your attitude going into the interview, choosing to see it as an opportunity to learn and present your best self, rather than a judgment of your worth as a person. You can control how you respond to unexpected questions, staying calm, thinking before speaking, being authentic rather than trying to guess what they want to hear. But you cannot control whether they like you, whether another candidate has more experience, whether the company decides to freeze hiring, or whether the interviewer is having a bad day. Recognizing this distinction doesn't mean you become passive or stop caring about outcomes. Instead, it allows you to channel all your mental energy into the areas where you actually have power, rather than wasting it on worry about factors beyond your influence. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal meditations while managing the complexities of ruling an empire, reminded himself daily, confine yourself to the present. He understood that anxiety thrives when we project our minds into uncertain futures or ruminate over unchangeable pasts. The present moment, right here, right now, is the only place where our control actually exists. This principle becomes even more powerful when we realize that our judgments about events are often more distressing than the events themselves. The Stoics taught that it's not what happens to us that causes suffering, but our opinions about what happens to us. A traffic jam is just cars moving slowly. It becomes a source of anxiety only when we add judgments like, "This is terrible," "I'm going to be late," or "This always happens to me." When you truly internalize the dichotomy of control, something remarkable happens. You stop fighting battles you cannot win, which immediately reduces your stress levels. You become more effective because you're focusing your energy where it can actually make a difference. You develop what the Stoics called inner citadel, a fortress of calm within yourself that remains unshaken by external turbulence. In our next exploration, we'll discover specific techniques for applying this principle in real time, including the Stoic practice of morning reflection that sets your mental framework for the day, and practical exercises for catching yourself when you slip into trying to control the uncontrollable. Now that we've established the foundational principle of the dichotomy of control, let's transform this philosophical insight into practical, daily habits that will rewire your brain's response to anxiety. The ancient Stoics weren't content with theoretical understanding. They developed specific exercises and routines that trained their minds like athletes train their bodies. Marcus Aurelius began each day with what we now call morning reflection, a practice so powerful that his personal notes became one of history's most influential books. But this wasn't passive meditation or wishful thinking. This was strategic mental preparation, like a general reviewing battle plans before engaging the enemy. And make no mistake, anxiety is your enemy, but it's an enemy that can be defeated with the right strategy. Here's how to build your own morning reflection practice. Before you check your phone, before you dive into the day's demands, spend just 5 minutes asking yourself three crucial questions. First, what challenges might I face today that are outside my control? Don't avoid thinking about potential difficulties. Acknowledge them directly. Maybe it's a difficult conversation with your boss, traffic on your commute, or waiting for important test results. Name these concerns specifically. Second question, what aspects of today's challenges can I actually influence? This is where you shift from victim to strategist. If that difficult conversation is coming, you can control how you prepare for it, the tone you take, and how you listen. If traffic might be an issue, you can control when you leave, your route choice, and your mental response to delays. If you're waiting for test results, you can control how you spend that waiting time and what support systems you activate. The third question is the most transformative. How do I want to show up as a person today, regardless of what happens to me? This isn't about outcomes. It's about character. Do you want to be patient, courageous, kind, resilient? The Stoics understood that external events are temporary, but the person you choose to be in response to those events shapes who you become permanently. But morning reflection is just the beginning. The real magic happens when you catch yourself in real time, slipping into anxiety about uncontrollable factors. The Stoics developed what I call the pause and redirect technique. When you notice your mind spiraling, and this takes practice to recognize, you literally pause whatever you're doing and ask, am I trying to control something outside my influence right now? Let's walk through a modern example. You send an important email to a potential client and immediately start obsessing. Will they respond? When? What if they say no? What if they don't respond at all? Your mind creates elaborate scenarios, each more anxiety-provoking than the last. This is the perfect moment for pause and redirect. You pause and recognize what's happening. You ask the control question. You realize that their response, timing, and decision are completely outside your influence. But what can you control? You can control whether you follow up appropriately, how you handle their response when it comes, and most importantly, how you use this waiting time. Instead of checking your email obsessively, you redirect that energy into controllable actions, reaching out to other potential clients, improving your services, or simply being present with your family. Seneca, the Roman statesman who balanced philosophy with practical leadership, taught a technique called premeditation of evils. But don't let the name scare you. This isn't about becoming pessimistic. It's about building mental resilience by briefly imagining potential setbacks and planning your response. When you mentally rehearse handling difficulties with grace and wisdom, actual challenges become less overwhelming because you've already practiced your response. For instance, if you're anxious about a presentation, spend a few minutes imagining things that might go wrong, technical difficulties, tough questions, or even forgetting your words. But here's the key. Don't just imagine the problems. Visualize yourself responding calmly, adapting skillfully, and maintaining your composure. You're not trying to control whether these things happen. You're preparing yourself to respond well if they do. The beautiful paradox of Stoic practice is that by releasing the illusion of control over external events, you actually gain tremendous power over your internal experience. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the author of your own responses. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice, like learning an instrument or developing physical fitness. But what about those moments when anxiety feels overwhelming, when your rational mind knows what to do, but your emotions are in full revolt? This is where the Stoics developed their most sophisticated techniques for emotional regulation, practices that modern neuroscience has proven remarkably effective for rewiring anxious thought patterns. Here's the truth that most anxiety management techniques miss. You can't think your way out of an emotional storm while you're drowning in it. When your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and your mind is catastrophizing, telling yourself to just relax is like trying to stop a hurricane with an umbrella. The ancient Stoics understood this fundamental challenge, which is why they developed sophisticated techniques for emotional regulation that work with your brain's natural processes, not against them. Epictetus, who knew suffering intimately as a former slave, taught that our emotions aren't caused by events themselves, but by our judgments about those events. This isn't philosophical wordplay. It's a revolutionary insight that modern cognitive therapy has validated. When you're anxious about a job interview, you're not actually anxious about sitting in a chair and talking to someone. You're anxious about your interpretation of what that conversation means: rejection, failure, financial insecurity, or damaged self-worth. The Stoic technique of reframing works by systematically examining these interpretations and asking a series of powerful questions. But this isn't positive thinking or denial. It's rigorous mental investigation. When anxiety strikes, instead of fighting the feeling directly, you investigate the thoughts feeding that feeling. You become a detective of your own mind, uncovering the hidden assumptions that transform neutral events into emotional emergencies. Let's work through a real example that many people face: the anxiety of social rejection. You're at a party and notice someone you tried to talk to earlier seems to be avoiding you. Immediately, your mind creates a story. They think I'm boring. I said something stupid. Everyone probably thinks I'm awkward. I shouldn't have come here. Each thought amplifies the anxiety, creating a cascade of emotional distress. Now apply Stoic reframing. First, separate the facts from your interpretations. The fact is, this person is not currently talking to you. Everything else, their motivations, their opinions, what others think, is interpretation. Next, generate alternative explanations. Maybe they're shy, dealing with their own social anxiety, received an important text, or simply didn't notice you. Maybe they're introverted and need breaks from conversation. Maybe they're thinking about something completely unrelated to you. But here's where Stoic reframing goes deeper than simple alternative thinking. Even if your worst interpretation were true, even if they do find you boring, how does that change your fundamental worth as a person? The Stoics taught that your value isn't determined by others' opinions, your social performance, or your ability to be universally liked. Your worth comes from your character, your efforts to be virtuous, and your commitment to living according to your values. Marcus Aurelius used a technique called the view from above when emotions threaten to overwhelm him. When you're caught in anxiety's tunnel vision, you zoom out and see the bigger picture. That embarrassing moment at work? In a week, most people will have forgotten it. In a year, it will be completely irrelevant. In the context of your entire life, it's a tiny blip. This isn't minimizing your feelings. It's putting them in proper perspective. Seneca developed what modern psychologists call temporal distancing. When facing anxiety about future events, he would ask, "How will I view this situation in 10 years?" This question has remarkable power to dissolve anxiety because it forces you to consider whether your current worry will matter in the long term. Most of our anxieties are about things that our future selves will barely remember, let alone consider significant. But what about those anxieties that do matter in the long term? Serious health concerns, relationship problems, or career challenges? Here, the Stoics employed dichotomous thinking, breaking every worry into elements you can and cannot control, then focusing exclusively on your sphere of influence. If you're worried about a health issue, you can't control the diagnosis, but you can control how quickly you seek treatment, how well you follow medical advice, and how you maintain your mental well-being during uncertainty. The most powerful Stoic reframing technique is what I call adversity as training. Instead of viewing difficult situations as problems to be avoided, you reframe them as opportunities to practice virtue. That difficult conversation becomes a chance to practice courage. That frustrating delay becomes an opportunity to develop patience. That criticism becomes a moment to practice humility and self-reflection. This reframe transforms you from anxiety's victim into life's student. Remember, emotional regulation through Stoic reframing isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending everything is fine. It's about changing the mental habits that transform manageable challenges into overwhelming crises. You're training your mind to respond to uncertainty with curiosity instead of catastrophe, to meet setbacks with resilience instead of resignation. But even with these powerful reframing techniques, there will be moments when anxiety feels too intense for rational analysis. This is when the Stoics turn to their most immediate and accessible tool, the breath itself, combined with ancient practices that modern science has proven remarkably effective for nervous system regulation. When Marcus Aurelius felt the weight of the Roman Empire crushing down on him, when Seneca faced exile and political persecution, when Epictetus endured the brutality of slavery, they didn't have access to modern anxiety medications or therapeutic interventions. What they had was something far more immediate and always available: their breath. The Stoics understood that the mind and body are intimately connected, and that by regulating the breath, you could directly influence your emotional state and mental clarity. Modern neuroscience has validated what the Stoics knew intuitively. Controlled breathing directly activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural rest and digest response that counteracts anxiety's fight or flight activation. When you're anxious, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which signals danger to your brain and amplifies the stress response. By consciously slowing and deepening your breath, you send a powerful message to your nervous system that you are safe. The Stoic breathing technique begins with what they called conscious return, deliberately bringing your attention back to the present moment through breath awareness. Unlike modern mindfulness practices that often focus on emptying the mind, Stoic breathing is purposeful and philosophical. As you breathe in, you're not just filling your lungs with air, you're drawing in clarity, courage, and connection to your values. As you breathe out, you're releasing not just carbon dioxide, but also the mental clutter that feeds anxiety. Here's how to practice Stoic breathing when anxiety strikes. First, find your natural breath rhythm without trying to change it immediately. Notice how anxiety has affected your breathing. Is it shallow, rapid, or held? Don't judge this. Simply observe with the curiosity of a philosopher studying human nature. Seneca taught that awareness itself is the beginning of wisdom, and this applies to breath awareness as much as any other form of self-knowledge. Now, begin to gently extend your exhales. The Stoics discovered that longer exhales activate the vagus nerve, which directly calms the nervous system. Count slowly as you breathe out, 4 counts in, 6 counts out. As you do this, remind yourself of a core Stoic principle with each breath cycle. Inhale. I focus on what I can control. Exhale. I release what I cannot control. This isn't just breathing. It's philosophical practice combined with physiological regulation. But Stoic anxiety management goes beyond breathing to include what they called grounding in virtue. When anxiety disconnects you from your sense of purpose and pulls you into hypothetical futures or regretful pasts, grounding practices anchor you in your fundamental values. Epictetus taught his students to carry what he called philosophical anchors, core principles they could return to when emotional storms threatened to sweep them away. One powerful grounding technique is the 5 Stoic senses practice. When anxiety overwhelms your mental space, deliberately engage each physical sense while connecting it to Stoic wisdom. Notice 5 things you can see and remind yourself that your perception shapes your reality. Notice 4 things you can touch, connecting you to the physical present that anxiety tries to pull you away from. Notice 3 things you can hear, practicing the Stoic discipline of attention. Notice 2 things you can smell, grounding you in the immediate moment. Notice 1 thing you can taste, often the metallic taste of anxiety itself, which you acknowledge without resistance. The Stoics also developed what modern therapy calls progressive muscle awareness, though they approached it through the lens of mind-body unity. When anxiety creates physical tension, you systematically notice each part of your body while applying Stoic principles. Feel the tension in your shoulders and remind yourself, I cannot control others' actions, but I can control my response. Notice your clenched jaw and reflect. This moment is an opportunity to practice patience. Feel your tight chest and remember, my worth is not determined by external outcomes. Perhaps the most powerful Stoic grounding practice is what Marcus Aurelius called return to role. When anxiety makes you feel lost or overwhelmed, you consciously reconnect with your fundamental roles and responsibilities. You're not just an anxious person, you're a parent, friend, colleague, citizen, student of life. Each role carries specific virtues and opportunities for meaningful action. Anxiety wants you to focus on your fears. Stoic grounding redirects you toward your purpose. These ancient practices work because they address anxiety at multiple levels simultaneously. The breathing regulates your nervous system, the philosophical reminders reframe your thoughts, and the grounding exercises reconnect you with your values and purpose. You're not just managing symptoms, you're strengthening the very foundations of emotional resilience. The beauty of these Stoic techniques is their accessibility. You don't need special equipment, perfect conditions, or hours of practice. Whether you're in a stressful meeting, stuck in traffic, or lying awake at night, your breath and your philosophical principles are always available. You're carrying with you the same tools that helped some of history's most resilient people navigate extraordinary challenges. But individual practices, however powerful, are only part of the Stoic approach to anxiety. The ancient philosophers understood that lasting emotional resilience requires something deeper, a fundamental shift in how you view yourself, your place in the world, and your relationship with uncertainty itself.